I call upon our first panel. This sets the stage for everything Synapse stands for, the powerful intersection of AI and change management, and how leaders today are navigating this evolving frontier.
In a landscape, we've been discussing this since morning in various forms and shapes. In a landscape where India's enterprises are no longer just support centers, but at the forefront of how transformation is being done, they're engines of innovation. The question isn't whether AI will be adopted, but how fast, how well, and how deeply can it be scaled? And that's where change management becomes a differentiator, ensuring AI is not just implemented, but truly integrated into our systems. This conversation that we're about to have will focus on what it really takes to lead a successful AI adoption through a proper change management process. And this also helps us bringing the scale into the organization from rethinking how leadership and our mindsets need to be wired.
So before we call upon our esteemed panelists, some quick information for the audience to know. Remember how we promised in the beginning that this would be a two-way conversation and not just a monologue? Well, you will all see a QR code on your booklets designated for the panel one page. It is a space for you to ask your questions as the panel conversation is going on, and we will address some of those questions at the end towards the Q&A. As Arun said in the beginning, please do include your email IDs so we can get back to you after the event if your question wasn't answered.
And sorry, go ahead.
We just encourage you to engage actively and be part of the dialogue that shapes today's event.
So this QR will go live in a few seconds once the panel begins. To steer our first discussion for this morning, we have none other than Krish as moderator, bringing his signature clarity, sharp thinking, and obviously the most impressive ability to keep strong voices on time. I see him giving me a stare, but that's true. All right. Thank you, Krish.
So let's keep that applause going as we welcome our panelists to the stage. First up, we have Amit Malik, President, Japan, Asia Pacific, and Australia at WordSpay. Anjali Sharma, Vice President, Digital, Data, and Platforms, Reliance Industries Limited. Dr. Nishant Chandra, Industry Co-Pilot Leader and Head, Microsoft.
Take a match.
Nithya Subramanian, Senior Director, Data and AI COE, Best Buy India.
I think we can clap louder than that and welcome our panelists on stage, right, Nithya? You would agree with me. Yeah, thank you.
And last but not the least, Satyaki Mookerjee, Chief Digital Officer, GOBP.
All right, I'm super excited to see a stage that's filled with beautiful, bright minds to talk over AI and change management. Krish, over to you. The stage is all yours.
You had me till you said beautiful, but I'm good. I'm good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I do have a bunch of questions, and I have put up names against them. So I'm going to address each of you guys and ask you a couple of questions. The others can chime in, but let's go through the first round with just the assigned targets. Assigned targets for the questions, right? We've been listening since the morning about how important it is for us to help our organizations through these transformation, that it is a journey and so on and so forth. We know all of that. But interestingly, we are coming into this conversation after having done tons of transformations, and our organizations presumably are used to them, right? So my question to Nithya and Nishant is, what is different, if indeed there is anything different, about these AI transformations and the past transformations we have had from the perspective of the organizations? Over to you.
So thank you, Krish, and hi, everyone. Good morning. So happy to be a part of this panel and, address some of the pertinent, I would say, topics related to change management, because change management had never been so important than what it is today. And that segues into the question which you asked about what is different in this particular transformation as compared to anything prior. This is the transformation that is getting as closest to the humankind, to each of us as individuals as possible as compared to any previous transformations. Because like we heard, right, AI is literally in our pocket. We couldn't have said this as much or as well about it, say in, for about an industrial revolution or anything of that sort before, right? So this is what makes it very different, right? This technology has democratized itself for everybody. And from an organizational standpoint, the impact of AI is much more prevalent, right, compared to any previous transformations. It has impacted all functions within an organization, be it in terms of improving the efficiencies, be in terms of finding new revenue streams, or be it in terms of increasing the size of the pie when it comes to the total addressable markets and the total to be solved opportunities, right? And that also makes me believe that some of the unfounded, I would say, myths about AI, that it's going to take away jobs, is also a significant, I would say, part of this transformation. But it's a myth, as I mentioned. It's because, as we see, the number of problems that we can solve, the amount of opportunities that we have in front of us is much more than ever before, right? The pie has increased, which means that AI is not taking a share of what we had been doing till now. It has helped us increase the scope of the impact that we can do, even within the context of an organization, even if you talk about supply chain, even if you talk about getting your products tailored or personalized for the customers, etc., right? Everywhere, the opportunities are much more. So that's great about this transformation.
Thank you, Krish, and good morning to everybody. So this is an interesting question. And, I think every time in history, if we go back, and every transformation in history, somebody would have asked the same question, why is this different, right? For the cricket aficionados in the room, let me ask you this question, right? The decision review system, DRS, which is introduced in cricket, is probably the biggest transformation for the game, not only for the game of cricket, but for all other games, including lawn tennis, including badminton and others, where you could use a human-in-the-loop AI system, which can then help make better decisions, right? And today, very few of us would like to go back to the old days where only the umpire was the sole decision maker. And why is that? It is because we trust the AI system, but we also trust the human in the loop, the final decision which the umpire makes in the edge cases. And having said that, I think, what Nithya just talked about in terms of the scope, in terms of the magnitude, in terms of the opportunity, all of that will be there. But this transformation also brings in a human-in-the-loop system, a system where we work as the gatekeeper, but we also let, support system to do things which, we could possibly not do at scale.
Thank you, Nishant. What I'm hearing from both of you, and I will pick on this a little later again, is the size, the scale, the touch is incredibly large, but it's not the driverless car yet. We still have someone at the wheels, right? Amit, Anjali, follow up on that question, because I know both of you are coming from organizations that are trying this differently, right? Amit, it's not only about AI, it's a blockchain storyline that is going to it, which is complementary to everything that you're doing. Anjali, in your case, you are saying, is it ready to productionize? Is it ready to go there yet? So my larger question again is, this question on, is this different from everything that preceded it? Does it apply in your cases too, where we are talking not about pervasive deployment across the organization, but we're talking about tailor-made elements, right? You're picking and choosing how you're going to apply AI, more like a careful chisel than like a net thrown over the whole storyline. What's your take? Is this transformation really that different?
Thank you. First of all, absolutely glad to be here. Taking a cue from, as my team members mentioned, that this era of AI transformation is different from the previously existing digital transformations or process transformations or system transformations. The question is that now with AI transformation in picture, whether a tailor-made approach works or all-pervasive approach works for the organization. That's an interesting question, but before I ask, as you mentioned, that my viewpoint on AI is that first thing, Gen AI is not the only AI. AI has a lot more than just Gen AI, which the only thing is that with Gen AI, it has gained a lot of attention. Having said that, most of the organizations are in either of one of the 4 stages which I put in my understanding. One, which you mentioned, from concept to proof of concept, pilot, then for one particular function or segment, then organization. Gen AI definitely is just at POC stages for the reasons of safety regulatory. The earlier AI, where we talk of algorithms, machine learning, deep learning, they are mostly at the functional level, functional scales, specific to specific functions and specific tasks. The AGI is still 5 to 10 years away. Having said that, we are in that era of POC to pilot to function specific. With this background and context, currently, the tailor-made approach is what is being taken by most of the organizations with an intent to have all pervasive. But we are not yet there. When I talk of why it has to be tailor-made, because most of the use cases are narrow, specific to function, specific areas, specific problems that are being solved. And with AI, the human fear factor is something new which has come in. As a case, the earlier technologies where human resistance was a little less, it was mostly process-driven, system-driven, but here we are talking of cognitive abilities of human, decision-making abilities of human. So with this particular factor of fear, plus decision-making, plus cognitive, and stating that AI solutions have an element of error in them, false positives, false negatives, plus the impact of social media, which increases a lots of myths. So with all these parameters, it has to be tailor-made in the current scheme of things before we make strategies for all pervasive.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Marg, Sudeshna, and everyone for having me here. Before I answer the question, a big shout out to all those 9-10% people who were curious. That's a skill that you will need to be successful in this world of AI. So if you are already there, you have a head start. So don't go by the 9% in minority. You have a head start over everyone else. Coming to the question, I think Anjali's just summed it up. I was looking at her answer and saying there's hardly anything that I can add to it, but let me give my perspective. I think it's a continuum. When you say tailor-made, we are actually at an ANI, which is a very narrow intelligence, right? Driverless cars or, whatever we are doing, like she said, it's very narrow. And that's where 80 to 90% of the work is happening today, right? And that's why, whether it's in any organization or in any project, we are still at that segment. And that's where the success is also coming in, because that's where the work is happening. When you look at Gen AI, I see that in the middle of the continuum, where like it's 20% of the work is happening. But in next 5 years, 7 years, a lot of work will start to happen there, where there'll be a lot more synergy with the human capability. But the end of the continuum is the capability intelligence, where AI is going to replace humans and exactly do what we want to do. Today, there's a lot of stuff that we would not want to do. And I think when we reach that stage of the continuum, then it will be all pervasive. And even if you look at the financial numbers being projected, right? If you look at Goldman Sachs says in next 10 years, AI will elevate the world GDP by 7%. Now, world GDP by 7% is a huge number. Or a McKinsey is saying it will be 12 trillion or a 13 trillion resource that we will have by 2030. That only will happen when it becomes all pervasive. Right. So I think that's the continuum that one has to look at, and that's where it is going. It is going to be the future. Coming to the blockchain concept that you said, I think there's a little bit of, a lot of people feel that with AI coming in, blockchain's taken a backseat. Yes, that's happened. But blockchain is going to be, in the end, the proof of truth that will make AI more successful. Today when you look at, let's take any solution, a banking solution or wherever, a lot of decisions that AI gives comes from a black box. You don't know how that decision was arrived at. You just have contours of what could have led into the decision, but the exact decision is how it's arrived is still a black box. When you add blockchain there, blockchain starts to decentralize that decision making, starts to make it more transparent, gives you a more operational input as to what goes into that decision. And I think that's where a complementary role gets played, right? You look at the banking industry today. So if you are a relationship manager who's advising somebody to buy a certain product, when it's all AI, it's black boxing. We don't know how Krish got, but AI told me to offer Krish this, so I offered Krish that. When you add blockchain and you add all the elements that I mentioned, there's an audit trail that brings in. So when a regulator comes in asking, was it the right decision from a Krish's risk profile, you then bring in blockchain and say, yes, these were the couple of things that went into that decision to help the institution give an answer. Just that.
Thank you so much. So what we're building up to is the scale might vary, the strategy might vary, the thought process might vary. And all of them are suitable to my organization at this point in time, for our strategy at this point in time. With that thought, Satyaki, Nithya, my question to you guys is, it sounds like the organization is going to read, when I say organization, I mean all my employees. They're going to read stuff in the newspapers. They're going to read stuff in their social media feeds. They're going to hear their neighbors doing different things. And then they're going to walk in and find my organization does this different. We've already been through this pain before, where the average employee says, I can put anything I want on tweet and I get on Twitter and get anything in my feed. But the moment I come into the organization, everything is restricted. So employees do feel the gap between how an organization implements something that they're seeing outside of the world. And they have two experiences now, as a private citizen and then one as an employee of the organization. With that preface, my question is not about the employee. My question is about leaders of change. In that context, with varying strategies around implementation and employees wondering, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And what do you want from me? What specifically are you seeing successful leaders do with AI transformations?
Thank you, Krish. And good morning, everyone. And thanks for having me here. So let me start with, as in any transformation, the first question to ask is, what is the problem we are trying to solve? I think that's the starting point. Technology is another technology. Let us assume that AI is another technology, not as hyped up as in the media, but it is another piece of technology. As a business leader, I tell my team that I would not buy a Ferrari because my neighbor has a Ferrari. I need to, if I have to buy a Ferrari and drive on the streets of Bangalore, that's a misfit. So the point is, what problem am I going to solve? And therefore, it starts with the what, the business problem and the what part of it. Then comes the why part of it. Why am I solving it? Right? Once I'm clear about the what and the why takes you to the KPI, what KPI in your organizational system are you actually involving or are you actually addressing? And that clarity of thinking is extremely important because eventually you will need funding. And that funding will come from the why part of it. What is it for me as an organization? And what is it for the employees? So I'll come to the employee part, but then first part is the what. The second part is the why. which you go through typically in a use case identification stage. And I'm coming down to the heart, the brass tacks of it. Then comes the how part of it. How would I do this? What scale of investment? What technology do I bring? Do I need what kind of tech stack do I bring in? Where do I do my data engineering? Where would my data pipelines be? What are the risks? What are the models that we need to bring? I mean, what are the inherent challenges around data privacy, data socialization that we need to bring in? So there is a whole lot of the how part, which will then come in. But then the question is, who will do it? The who part. And who does not mean only the tech players. It means our business, who define the what and the how, the why part of it. So the composition of the players starting from business, which is the end user. And you were mentioning this, Krish. A lot of times managers say, I do not have time. It is true they may not have time, but it is so long they define the KPI as an outcome they want to see, and they engage the right people from their organization who are the champions of AI within their organization. That's the first point. Then you bring what's that squad structure going to look like? What's the composition that going to look like? And what is that governance mechanism that you run? So all of these you put together in the form of an overall, first the vision, but also a strong execution plan. And when you go for it, one of the things that we need to realize is, if there is no adoption, it would never be successful. So what are the challenges in the adoption? And I'm giving you very simple examples. In one of my companies, we were doing AI with the R&D, and we had all MTechs and PhDs who would do product design, and they would, the key challenge was, how do you bring down the product cycle time design from 50 days to, we had a target of 20 days. I was under the assumption that this is where I would face the least resistance. And I was assuming that the highest resistance would be in the factory, where the people will think about their jobs being lost, because that's the popular perception in the market. To my surprise, the biggest resistance was from the MTechs and the PhDs, because they felt they would lose out on the narrative. So it was not a job, but the fact that I do very complex work and that AI would cut down the product trial cycle time from multiple manual trials to AI-based fitment algorithms can actually cut down was a huge, I would say, a resistance in the path. So the reason why I gave that example is also because to understand what do we de-bottleneck, what are the kinds of fears, and what are the messaging we need to come along with, so that people do not put this as an impediment in the path, but rather they see this as a performance multiplier. So I think that narrative setting is also very important.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing more to add. It's been such wonderfully explained, answer, right? I think thank you for that, right? So that makes my job very simple. I just wanted to share that one thing I've observed in such kind of scenarios is that the dampener for change is when, as leaders, we get way too prescriptive, right? And I'll give you an example, right? I have two daughters. My younger one, she was very keen in learning swimming, okay? And then probably she saw a few people swim on the TV, and she wants to be a swimmer. And then she said, I want, okay, fine. I enrolled her for a class and all of that. You won't believe, the first 2 days she was very scared. It was a huge change. She used to just play in water. She didn't think that one day she'll be forced to kind of hold her breath and swim and all of that. It was a huge change for her. So she thought it was cool, but then when she had to encounter that change, it became real for her, right? And then so I could have prescribed saying that, hey, no, this is good. See, others swimming, they've also learned and all of that. It's going to be easy. I just made her observe how others are learning, how they are enjoying, how they are seamlessly swimming without getting drowned. Her thing was, I'll get drowned the moment I, go into the swimming pool. So for a few days, I made her observe. And then after that, gradually, she started kind of doing one step at a time, two steps at a time. And then finally, now she's very good at swimming. The reason why I'm saying is none of us are any different from a 6, 7-year-old when we all are encountering change. As leaders, as employees, as people, as children, we are the same, right, in terms of a reaction. So I liked your slide, right, about it's not the organizations, it's the individuals who change. And as leaders, we need to allow individuals space to undergo that change rather than enforcing it on them and prescribing, giving us an example or others an example. That doesn't work. I tell this to my daughter, she'll say, Mommy, don't compare me with others. That's the reaction, right? You give them the time that they need, enable them with the kind of tools, with the kind of process changes, or anything that really helps them kind of endure that change, adopt that change, and excel at that, right? And empower them. In going wrong, that's okay. Failing fast is good. Experiment, fail fast. Understand what this change means to you. Explore the universe that this change opens up for you. I'm not going to tell you, even if I tell you, you're not going to believe me. So go and look for it on your own. Experiment, find, research, right? So giving them that space, right? Giving them the kind of tools and giving them the, I would say, autonomy in that case to experiment and, come up with their own perspective is a very good, process in which they will, at some point in time, will make the change their own, right? Rather than, being threatened, saying that if I don't do this, I might lose my job. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you. For the audience, please notice that they are talking about two things that leaders do. One, what you heard from Satyaki was define it. Define it meaningfully. Define it in a way that's actionable. Define it in the way that the organization that experiences it can relate to the intention of the organizational design. Why did we choose to do this is apparent as each function experiences that particular change, right? And what you're hearing from Nithya is that's not going to happen unless you have a coach, a support system, a support structure right next to where the change is happening. So you need to push from the top, but you also need to have a safety net for this both to get balanced, right? Proceeding from there then, Nishant and Anjali, my question to you is, yes, agreed, all this is important. But in the meanwhile, as we do this, there is an impatient clock, which is the shareholder return on investment. There is an organizational need. Satyaki pointed out that we need clear KPIs to measure the whole storyline with, right? So whether it's tailor-made or it's pervasive, where it's a larger storyline and I'm allowing the rest of the organization to indulge in it, whichever way you go, what are you seeing already as clear ROI measurement for AI implementation? Or at least which KPIs do you see them most pointed towards?
Thank you for that question. I did my engineering in computer science, but I did my MBA in finance for the very reason so that I can either talk about the top line or the bottom line of my digital products. Of the 33 years I've been associated with technology, my initial 10 years were only learning and development. And 23 years, I have been delivering digital products. If I calculate at least one digital product every 6 months, that's close to 45 to 50 digital products. And in all these, this is what has worked, which I'm going to say. 3 types of products I had been implementing in my career, which was either a COTS product or a customized product or a bespoke product. For these 3 kind of products, the rule of 25-75, 30-70, 40-60 worked for me. What does that mean? In my course, understanding development was only 25%, for customized maybe 30%, and for bespoke maybe 40%. The rest 60% or 60 to 75%, 50% of that time was just dialogues. And those dialogues were first with the senior management on understanding, as he rightly mentioned, what are we trying to solve? And the KPIs associated with those. Does it even make the business sense? If it makes a business sense, that is half part of the problem solved. The other half on the ROI is, will our people adopt it? The rest 50% was only on adoption. Why? We are all adult learners. We have a choice. And we know we have a choice. As against kids, we can tell them, do this. Here, we are here on a working day by choice. We would want to learn what we want to learn, right? With having said that, now, if there is no consistency, there is no adoption, right? Now, when I started my first project in AI, this percentage came down to 15 to 20% on the development part of it. And 80% was on the change management. Because it was a new concept with 4 kinds of people in the room, starting from baby boomers to alpha, with 90 seconds of attention span. Management scared about AI and its bad effects, biases, error percentages, no human intervention, no governance and laws. DPDP Act still struggling with it. EUs and US still figuring out how to make the laws. So that out of that 80%, 70% was to convince the management, right? And remaining 30 for the adoption. Let me tell you, the solutions of AI are easy to understand and solve, right? Its interpretation is what is difficult. But having said that, the first AI project with this approach, defining the KPIs upfront with the management and getting that change management right, we were able to show a financial ROI, let alone the customer experience, and let alone the productivity enhancement.
Makes sense. Thank you. So I'm sitting here, as you can see, I work at Microsoft, but, what I'm trying to, what I'll tell is a public, data information, and, whatever I say is my personal opinion. Last week, Microsoft yearly financial reports came out, and Satya Nadella specifically talked about one thing, where he said that the return on investment on Azure, and for some of you who don't know what Azure is, it's the cloud offering. Azure made as much money in 1 month as it used to make in 5 years when it came out, right? So when we talk about return on investment, the return on investment has a compounding effect. The compounding effect would be seen later on. It's not seen today. Today, your effect is minuscule. It's few percentages. Imagine a platform like a cloud platform like Azure growing 33% year over year and making not millions, but several billions of dollars in growing at that rate. However, going back to the history, back in 2015, 2016, 2017, when the world was talking about cloud first, there were a lot of skepticals. There were a lot of people who were saying, hey, I want on-prem. What would cloud do for me? Safety was a challenge, right? Except that if you were not on cloud, then you could not have taken GenAI now, right? So there is a reason why you need to adopt new technology, because it enables you to do something better later on. If I take some examples from physics, we know that there is a black hole. How do we know it? Because black hole has gravity and that bends light coming from behind black hole. We can't see it. We have reasons to believe that there is a black hole, and that reason is good enough for us to make assumptions and build on that theory, right? These technologies are transformative. There are unknowns. Yes, I don't know how things would shape up. There are several such technologies which have come and gone. Some are transformational, some dissipate. However, the ROI for these technologies have to be through compounding, through the next big product which is built on it. But if you don't do it now, you will lose, the chain later on. So, it's a long game. None of these things are small, none of these things are short, and none of these things are for the impatient.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you. But for me, what Anjali, Nishant, whatever you guys are saying raises a concern. I'm going to put Satyaki and Amit on the spot to answer this. Satyaki, you pointed out that ideally for my successful transformations, it has to be designed to address KPIs, which are clear, right? Why KPIs? I'm guessing your point is KPI is what the employee sees. And if they don't see the needle moving, there's not much need for them to sustain the change, right? Amit, you too pointed out that it's not about the underlying technology, but it's about what the person does with the technology. And many of these technologies will be nested, will be stacked, right? But what I'm hearing from Anjali and from Nishant is it is a long game, right? And we have to spend time, spend effort defining it. And those definitions might not be immediately obvious to the rest of the organization. It'll be obvious at the senior most level, perhaps at the senior middle level. But after that, it will dissipate and it might sound just like one other project, right? With that thought in mind, my question is, what the organization asks during a change is employee X go start doing this, stop doing this, modify doing this. But there is no measurement or no obvious measurement for that employee on whether there is an impact out of it. Now, how does that balance between organizational benefit coming out eventually and you imposing a change on an employee or a function and say, do this now? How does that balance work? What does it take to make that work?
So the way I would, and I can give you my perspective. So the best way to do this is not through a top-down instruction, but to evolve through typically what we call as design thinking workshops, because that's when the ownership comes up and how is my day in a life going to change? That needs to evolve at the lowest most level. I don't think that there can be an instruction from the top. But then the KPIs that you measure or that you put forth, we need to understand two things. Let's take a simple example of a cross-sell and upsell AI, right, algorithm. Or let's say a forecasting accuracy of demand for product. Now, the actual role will lie with a certain part in the business. I'm taking a practical example to illustrate the point. Now, the CEO will ask you that even if you did this and the accuracy is 90% of that algorithm, what did it do eventually to my top line and bottom line? Eventually, when they invest money, they say, oh yeah, I know your KPIs are increasing, but finally, what did it contribute, right? Because they don't see at the end of the day only in terms of individual KPIs, which are all important, but we need to find a way, and therefore that capability is important, whereby you can link the lower level KPI to a higher order business lever And there could be approximations because we do not have absolutely well-defined empirical relations. You will not find that. That if I do my forecasting accuracy from X to Y, my cost goes down by so and so, right? Those levers are not well established. So when you look at from a CEO's lens, the CEO would still ask you, I put in X crores as your investment, back to Anjali's point, when she goes there. He would want to understand, he or she would want to understand what does that mean in terms of my bottom line and top line. Often the problem becomes the attribution of AI to that KPI becomes difficult. Because you could have sales increase because your competitor shut down. Your sales could go up because you undercut your price. How do you demonstrate that your algorithm that you created actually resulted in the increase of sale for your company? So those attributions, I don't think anywhere there is a clear answer how you attribute. So these approximations still come in the picture. Some empirical ways of correlation still come in the picture. But so long we accept that this is what we are going to measure, this is how we are going to correlate, and this is how we're going to report, there would be some degree of alignment between the person who is at the bottom and who's looking from the top in terms of the overall expectations.
Fair enough. Makes sense.
I think that's a very hard answer to match, but I'll take a different building on what he said. I'll go back to the first principles, right? Something that Satyaki did allude. I think, when you look at the balance of the person who's doing it and the organization or the management that wants it, the bigger question is that whole why, the purpose. So you look at what AI can do. You look at that function's key drivers, and you look at the commonality, and that's where you start to identify and say, okay, this is my driver, this is what AI can do, and this is what I'm going to do. So I think that's the starting point. And always in doubt from a first principle standpoint, you focus to say that's why I'm doing it. The second level that you go to and ask is it automation or is it augmentation? And I think that clarity needs to come in. Am I augmenting a process or I'm absolutely automating a process? The third is to focus on the task, not the job. We typically fall into this pitfall of focusing on the job. And that's where that balance starts to get wobbly. You have to focus on the task. Let's go to the hierarchy and say it's a call center executive, right? Who's very, very fussed about the job. Don't focus on his or her job. Focus on the task that you're automating. And once you focus on the task, then that acceptance comes in. And then whatever the job, it may manifest into a job at a later stage. Yes, it may or may not. It may enhance the job, it may eliminate the job, it may reinvent the job or transform the job. That's where the organization skills comes in as to how do you build that capability of what the job is going to change. And that's important again. So of these three first principle questions, the fourth one is the ability for the organization to then see how this is going to change the job and how you are reskilling that individual or the job holder so that the person is still relevant in the organization. And I think if you look at these 3 or 4 steps, then you are able to get that balance most of the time, if not always.
Makes sense.
I just want to add a little bit to the point. What measure? I completely agree that it's a very fuzzy logic how much to be attributed to the initiative, digital initiative, was vis-a-vis whatever is happening in the market or in the organization level. Some tricks that I use is that if in your product you are able to charge a premium because of my digital product differentiation, I would like to take that as ROI. Second, if it is saving you cost, then I want.
Sorry, Anjali. I get it, but the bone I'm picking with Satyaki, with Amit, with Anjali is you're still giving me a response that fundamentally says, let the employee keep doing work. There is a benefit. There is a counter ticking somewhere. And someone is getting the benefit. Eventually, it will all become clear. And for me, that seems a weak foundation. Just hold the thought for a second. I'm going to toss one more question at all of you. Short answers required because it's a tricky one. That's my last question as a panel from here because audience, by then I'm hoping you have posed your questions. Please make sure you're prefixing your question with your email ID because in case I'm not able to bring it up here, we can respond elsewhere. So again, Satyaki, with Anjali and others too. For me, the missing link, I might be wrong, but my missing link is there is the group, maybe the CEO of our office, technology office, that has said, let this change be, let AI happen. There is the employee that is going through the change. Perhaps the bridge between what you described is the functional head of that employee redefines that broader AI, maybe it's pervasive, maybe it's tailor-made, but redefines that changes benefit in this function's terms and says, what we will see in this silo is this benefit. So don't worry about the bigger picture. Maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't, but you and I are seeing this. We need that translator. We need not just a translator, but we need the owner of the change to not be central, but someone closer to the employee. It's my hypothesis. So I'm going to ask you all this question. My question to you is, as it's happening right now, who is the owner of these AI transformation? Is it the CEO office? Is it a technology team? Or is it business leaders? Where is ownership sitting?
So, Chris, if you allow me a moment, right, before we get to
all of you are
answer,
taking this question.
right? One thing I have realized, right, when it comes to attribution of any of these digital initiatives, right, driven by AI, etc., to, which solution is responsible for that. I think that context, that premise itself is questionable, right? End of the day, I feel that in today's world where attribution is very difficult, we should play a team game or not a game of individual excellence, right? So assume we are playing a football, not a game of chess, right? Because if you look at football, there are different players with different contributions to the end goal, right? So in a similar situation, in kind of a typical digital transformation where you have a list of solutions, right, all directed towards a certain 2-3 key organizational priorities, right, then I think we should not burn our heart in trying to attribute, okay, X% is because of solution 1, Y% is because of solution 2. Collectively, how the digital transformation is played out is very, very important. So that achievement mentality, we need to kind of come out of it and come to a team outcome or a team playing mentality. That's one thing. And to your point, who owns the digital transformation is who's responsible for the outcomes of the digital transformation, right? And the person who is sponsoring it obviously will require a certain ROI measure at the broader level. I'm still not talking at the solution or the tactics level, but at the broader level. But who is driving the digital transformation? Who is setting the, I would say, the goals for the digital transformation? How my future is going to look like from now onwards until, say, the next 5 years, next 8 years, etc. Are the functions, right? Who needs to set the tone, and of course all the investments should follow that.
So probably I'll add to what Nithya said. The best that I've seen work is co-ownership.
Okay.
Co-ownership, because we can continue to split hairs as to who contributed what and how we did it. The fact of the matter is, unless business and technology comes together to produce the outcome, it will never happen. So to do that, what needs to change? In the goal sheet, and I've gone through it, so I know I've seen that success. Let's say there are projects, and you always pick up high visible projects, obviously, to be in my goal sheet. So while it is 3 important projects in my goal sheet with a certain percentage assigned, even the business heads also co-own them. And therefore, if we rise together or we sink together, there is no middle path. And therefore, it is a co-ownership in my view, because at the end of the day, if they are not there, I have also seen cases where people do not even turn up for meetings because they say, I have far more important things to do, and it is not a part of their KPI, and they know I can still get my bonus, and I'm going to very, very operational stuff, but this is the reality. I will still get my bonus by increasing the sales, even if I do not do through an AI model, but following the regular way of working. So that's, in my view, no splitting hairs, shared success, and co-ownership of KPIs, I think is the way to go.
Makes beautiful sense.
I just want to add, I think it's a, just building on what both of them said, I think it's a mindset issue. In a business today, are you coming with an exec mindset, an executive mindset, or are you coming with a functional leader mindset? If you're coming with an executive mindset, where you look at the organization first over the function, then you will do what both of them said. You will co-ownership, you will co-create, you will own it up, because you know that at the end of the day, it's not about my function, it's about the organization that has to come out as a winner. And then you will focus on the execution part and getting it delivered, now whether it's co-executed or it's individually executed. If you come from a functional standpoint, and that mindset, even if you're at the top table, which is also, I'm being provocative here and saying, which is far more pervasive than an executive mindset, then you go to what Satyaki said. You look at your own bonus and say, I'm going to get my bonus. It doesn't matter whether organization meets this driver or not. My drivers are very different. And I think that mindset change has to happen first, then the ownership piece or the co-execution piece can.
Yeah. Partly I agree to that and this point as well, where I say it's co-ownership, but the main ownership is at the top level. I believe that even the way it happened in digital transformations, an all-pervasive AI mindset change also has to come from the ownership of the business head. In turn, they have to enable the ones which are down the hierarchy. That is very important, where I'm talking about co-ownership, collaboration, shared goals, right? Because ultimately, implementation and acceptance or accountability, responsibility lies there. That's my take on that.
So, in my personal opinion, every employee of the company has to be the owner. And I'll tell you why. Steve Jobs, when he came up with Lisa, he took a handful of very smart people, went into a separate building and built Lisa. And we all know how that showed up. Steve Jobs came back to Apple, created a cultural shift, a mindset shift, that it is about design. And every employee of the organization connected with that design mindset, and then the organization built upon it. So it has to be, every employee has to buy into that mindset. We can also take, and this, by the way, is not an organizational mindset also. It's also we as human beings, right? Evolution. In early 90s, when cars came out, what people wanted was faster horses. You know why? It was because there was no road. There were no zebra crossings, right? And they wanted faster horses because they did not know that there should be roads, there should be traffic rules, which needs to be followed, right? And hence, a mindset shift over a period of few years led to the evolution. And hence, I believe that it has to be every employee of the company, every person in a country, every human being in the world who is responsible for these changes.
I hear you. And what I'm taking away is, it's not good. Don't let your AI implementation sit with one chair. Broaden the net, create a coalition, bring people together. And as you bring people together, make sure they have the right mindset to steer something like that, navigate it across the organization. But don't stop at the leadership level. Bring in managers, bring in employees, bring in as many as possible, right? Which makes beautiful sense. And that's something we should probably, it's a should-be state and it's not an is state yet. We should work towards it. I'm switching now to audience questions, and I'm taking the liberty of paraphrasing some of them. One of the questions is asking about the fact that most AI transformations seem to have productivity and efficiency as focus rather than something more core as R&D. How do we bubble that up? It's a question. I'm paraphrasing it. I'm making it bigger and asking, given the fact that AI is in our pockets, how do I, as an employee or a functional head, attract AI investment attention of the organization? How do I make a case for bringing AI into my world when I'm bringing up the use case? Any thoughts from any of you? I'm opening this up.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that question. Definitely, the AI, when it started in our organization, it was somebody who propagated AI concept and sold it to the management. So very relevant and pertinent question. In this particular case, the way that team or that particular group of people went about was the first thing they did and addressed, which they knew because they were technically a little asymmetry was there than the business in technology. The first thing to address and strengthen is the governance and security. In large organizations, in established organizations, this is one of the most critical concerns, right? Which is brand, security, safety, and data privacy. If you have a really good use case and you can substantiate its ROI or its returns and its usefulness, the first thing that you need to address how you are going to govern, how you are going to secure, and how you are going to limit the tendency of false positives or false negatives. That is what I think needs to be convinced at the top management level to make a use case successful.
One more of you to give the answer, and then I'll move on to the next question.
Look, could you come again with the question? I think somewhere we lost the track. Yeah.
The question was, if I am a function with a use case, since me and my employees are very well versed in AI, how do I attract AI investment attention of the organization into my use case? How do I get the organization to bet on my application of AI in R&D?
Okay. So basically, it's a little bit, because when you read the question, it felt like how can organizations ensure that they have a right balance of
downward up?
Okay. So, see, I think having the right size of investment in R&D vis-a-vis more kind of operational use cases, right? It's a fine balance, right? Which organizations have to make, not choosing one over the other, right? And when we are, usually apportioning the budgets across, where we want to put our money, right? In terms of, okay, these are 4 or 5 use cases that, that are pretty critical for my organization and that they need to be immediately solved, right? AI or not AI, whatever is the right solution. Whereas there has to be a very deliberate choice to kind of apportion a little bit of budget in order to explore the art of possibility with all the evolving technology which is coming up. And almost every second week we are seeing new things being thrown at us, right? Countries kind of trying to catch up on each other, organizations trying to catch up on each other on the next best generative AI, the next best agentic AI solutions, etc. Right? So we should ensure that we are not losing the track of what is possible with all of the technology, and then we come up with unique use cases, right, that may not be immediately relevant, but at some point in time in future, they would be very, very important for us to solve and try to solve them and kind of preempt us being from irrelevant in future. Yeah.
I'll give it a short answer, Krish. The principle of drawing investment is no different from any other business. It's the business case. But the only issue is if you create a business case for only one use case, the economies of scale will not really help you. So generally, it is better to go with a more broader view of what you want to achieve as an AI program with a broader set of use cases and not based on one use case, which will not justify your financial investment.
I see what you're saying. I also feel that the question came from the perspective of, I want to have a tailor-made AI application. How do I get the organization to sign up? But I see where you're coming from. Right?
But to answer that, if that was the question, there are a lot of point solutions which are AI embedded. For example, route optimization, or you want to have a specific demand forecasting solution. They have their own ROI, very point solutions. You can always go for it. But that's not really an AI. They are bot solutions with a specific AI embedded into it. That's how I see this.
Fair point. My last question is, what I'm taking away thus far is We are in the early stages of AI transformation projects. A lot of it is definitional. Where results are visible, the results are eventually going to translate to a long play, because we need those results to translate to not short-term results, but mindset and capability. So the game here is a little longer. So get the definitions right, create those coalitions, create groups of people who are bought into it, share the burden of success of AI. Don't let it rest on one function, one leader. Make sure that many people are holding it. In all this, I'm wondering, how do you foresee the conversation between managers and employees on this change as they are sitting in their conference room and talking about it? And how do you want to use change management to structure that conversation? What part of that conversation do you want to intercept? Because at the manager and employee level, it's no longer about many of the things we have been discussing. These are more at the design level, right? So as you walk into that conversation, maybe you're watching this as a fly on the wall, what do you want that conversation to be, and how do you plan to make that happen? This is my last question, so over to you guys.
I'll start. I think that if you go to the bottom of the hierarchy and say manager and a team member, what you want that conversation to focus is take the fear out. And that's the manager's job to a sergeant. And I'll go back to my point of saying focus on the task, not at the job. And that's when you take the fear out of it. And whatever fear then remains is, you have to look at a little bit in the past. A lot of people, and I'm going to take this example, which I often quote, is when Excel came in, a lot of people thought accountants will lose job, and Excel has created more jobs in accounts and finance than, prior to it was. And similarly, it's going to happen in AI. Jobs will be lost, but more jobs will get transformed. I think that conversation, a simple conversation of saying, what will change? I'll take the fear out of it. And how will we help support the employee standpoint, from education, from retraining, from giving them exposure to AI, helping them understand what AI can do. We've all talked about it. It's actually at a very hierarchical level, at a senior level that people talk about it. Does your guy understand that AI? And, get that clarity and understanding. Keep it simple. I think that'll help.
Yeah, for me, I think the critical role that change management agents have to play is to do away with the information asymmetry. Business doesn't understand technology. Technology doesn't understand business. CFO doesn't understand technology. Technology doesn't understand ROI. The fear, the psychological factor, HR doesn't understand technology. Technology doesn't understand the human factor. The change management agents have to bring all of these stakeholders at a single platform. They have to be able to tell technology what is important for business, what is important for numbers, what is important for people. Individually, neither the business head, nor the manager, nor the technology head, nor the HR head are equipped enough to do it. So if AI has to happen, the role of change management becomes all the more critical.
So I would look at it slightly differently, in the sense there are so many roles. If we start with the definition of what's the role of future looking like, for example, I'm a procurement analyst. How does the role of a procurement analyst look different in light of AI? If I'm a quality engineer, how does my day in a life look like? And therefore, it starts with the role definition per se. When you start with the role definition, then we say, okay, we came out with this role definition. This is where I stand, and an honest conversation between a manager and his direct report to say, this is what the aspiration is in terms of a role of future. This is where you stand. What competencies do you need to build? And therefore, it's an integrated action to say, what learning path do we create so that it enables that learning and that shift, not just that learning, that technology enable and learning to go hand in hand to actually change. So I think a lot of conversation should be how we enable that path, what kind of learning roadmap should we have, and what kind of KPIs for future we should be tracking versus what we do now.
So I'll just very shortly add, there are two levels of these conversations that we need to have with our employees. Level one is just to listen. And very intently, very deliberately, intentionally, we need to listen, because everybody has got a reason why they are not very keen in doing something and changing, right? So what I have seen in my conversations, where I kind of make a point that I listen only and then be very less focused on solutioning upfront and prescribing upfront, is that first is it's about the fear of, what you call it, a survival instinct, and we all of us have, right? And that's where all of these questions about when AI comes, will my job become irrelevant, and all of that comes from that survival instinct. The other one is inertia to change. But 3 saal ho gaya, 30 saal ho gaya, why do I learn a new technology and all of that? That inertia to change, right? And these are what I've observed, as mostly coming in my conversation. So first and foremost, we need to listen to what is actually going on in the mind of the employees, and then kind of alleviate those by all the conversations, the great points that have been raised about, why it should not take away your job and things like that, right? Now, the second level of conversation is like what he greatly mentioned about once, the emotional aspect of a change is taken care of, then we come to the practical aspect, the more structured aspect of where we are today and where we want to go. And this is the path. And this is a path is also, it shouldn't be a prescription. It'll be like, let's co-create. Let's see what works for you. Let's see what also works in the broader context of the organization. It has to be your journey enabled by me, right? So that's the second level of conversation. Yeah.
I'll skip answering this question, but I'll put you on a spot asking one question. In your presentation, you talked about being AI agnostic, and the first session was about AI and change management.
Oh, true. I meant AI agnostic in terms of specific AI model and specific AI technology. It is about AI after all.
No, that's it. That's all.
Thank you, Nishant. From my side, I think this was important, because what we are saying is you're going to have an elevator pitch in your mind as you go up with the CEO and get the sign in for doing this AI transformation. And on the way down, you're going to be with a very junior employee who's going to say, what does this change mean for me? And we need to have answers to both those questions. And ideally, you have someone who's doing the job of being a change manager, who's managing those change agents, who's managing those conversations, who's giving the managers enough of a sounding board for them to build those skills to have meaningful conversations and get the data back and forth. It cannot be taken for granted. Change management cannot be taken for granted. Thank you so much, panel. Thank you, audience. And with that, we're done.
Yes.
Those were some amazing insights into the entire world of AI, change, and strategy. Can we have, again, a big round of applause for our panelists and our moderator?
And we really would love to thank you. And Krish, we need your help in handing over a small token of appreciation from the Synapse team to our panelists. All right. Thank you to Amit, Malik for joining us, sharing your insights. Thank you to Anjali Sharma. A big thanks to Dr. Nishant Chandra. Big thanks to Nithya for being with us this morning, sharing your insights. And big thanks to Satyaki for joining us this morning again and sharing your insights. Can we have a huge round of applause for them to set? Yeah, nothing completes without big smiles and a group picture. So thank you, leaders, for being with us this morning and part of Synapse 2025. We now invite them to take their seats with the audience.